Hi, I'm Rich MacDonald, and this is the second in a series of 4 videos on basic snare drum technique and how it applies to the drum set. Here in part 2, we're going to define and demonstrate 4 stroke types. They are full stroke, surface tap, tap lift, and the downstroke. So the first one is the full stroke, which starts and ends in the top position. If you remember from our discussion of the level and molar systems in part 1, this can be any height. Here I'll be demonstrating it as a height of 5, or the highest level. And then, of course, single stroke. So I'm thinking of that stroke as being one motion from the top to the bottom and back up again. Okay? The second stroke is what we call the surface tap, which is where you would play right at the surface of the instrument. Surface taps are interesting because you can't really initiate a tap until you play it with the wrist. You can't really start with the fingers. But once you start it with the wrist, you can simply then use the fingers for the remaining taps if you do it with one hand, for example, like this. Initiated with the wrist and continued with the fingers. The concept of the surface tap is to stay as close to the surface as you can, usually anywhere from a ½ inch to an inch above the surface. Singles. So the obvious thing now is that we have what we would call softer strokes, the surface taps, and the louder strokes, the full strokes. Okay, those are our 2 options. Now, the other 2 strokes are how we get to those full strokes and to those surface taps. In order to get to the top, we have to lift. So we have at the end of a tap, we like to call it a tap lift. We just simply tap and head for the top. That's a tap lift stroke. If we have a series of strokes, let's say we wanted to play accented strokes on one in a series of 4 notes, we would then need, which was the 4th stroke, the downstroke to drop at the drum. So using that then methodology, if we start with a downstroke, we can either play a tap or we can play a tap lift to come back up. If we wanted to do 4 notes, as I mentioned earlier, we do this. The left hand. So that right there illustrates 3 of the strokes. We have downstroke, tap, tap, tap lift, downstroke, tap, surface tap, tap lift, downstroke, surface tap, tap lift. And you often see this like on videos illustrating the molar stroke where they use triplets. And again, those are 3 strokes. Downstroke, surface tap, and tap lift. Finally, in keeping with our 2 levels approach that we discussed in part 1, it's important to note that the full stroke and the downstroke should have the same volume, relatively loud or accented strokes. And the tap lift and the surface tap then should also have the same volume, relatively soft or unaccented. Getting these consistent will provide great clarity in the 2-level approach that's so common when using the molar system. Now let's go to part 3 and apply these strokes using page 5 of Drumset Concepts Volume I.